What if everything you thought about premium motorcycles was a lie? While Harley Davidson clings to chrome and nostalgia, a Chinese-built bike just undercut their entire playbook for half the price. Affordable, capable, real. Watch till the end, because if you ride, this changes everything. The bike that shouldn't exist. A full-sized, twin-cylinder adventure motorcycle with a liquid-cooled engine, switchable ABS, dual disc brakes, and a digital display, for less than $6,500. Yet that is exactly what Lexmoto pulled off with the Pioneer 500X. Overnight, the release sent shockwaves through an industry accustomed to upmarket pricing and bloated branding. This wasn't just a competitive product, it was a direct attack on everything Harley Davidson had built its modern pricing around. The Pioneer 500X launched with a 471 cubic centimeter parallel twin engine, producing just over 43 horsepower. Riders immediately noticed its Bosch fuel injection, a 6-speed transmission, and adjustable KYB suspension, features normally reserved for bikes nearly twice its size and 3 times its price. Then came the extras: USB charging ports, LED lighting, Metzeler tires, and an A2 license-friendly classification. What stunned the market wasn't just the value, it was how little Lexmoto asked for it. At $6,600, the Pioneer 500X doesn't undercut competitors. It humiliates them. Brands that once positioned themselves as affordable luxury now look bloated and overpriced. The media started calling it the budget disruptor, but the real disruption was emotional. Riders who had waited years to afford a mid-sized bike suddenly had a real option. And Harley Davidson? It was nowhere near this league of accessibility. Even dealerships, many loyal to legacy brands, were quietly shaken. Some admitted off the record that the bike was causing customers to hesitate, to ask hard questions about what they were really paying for. In a single product drop, Lexmoto didn't just enter the conversation, it rewrote the terms entirely. While industry veterans scrambled for explanations, a new generation had already taken the keys and the lead. Generation Z's two-wheeled rebellion. For decades, Harley Davidson has built its brand on rebellion. Leather, noise, muscle, symbols of defiance etched into every ad campaign. But here's the problem. Gen Z isn't buying it. They're buying Lexmoto. And they're doing it not with borrowed nostalgia, but with clear intent, because this bike fits their lives, their licenses, and their budgets. The Lexmoto Pioneer 500X hits the sweet spot for emerging riders. With an A2 license classification, it's legal for new riders across the UK and Europe. That means no more waiting. No more overpriced entry-level models that feel like toys. For under $6,000, young people get a real machine, one they can commute on, tour with, and yes, customize. More importantly, they're not being sold a fantasy. Harley's romanticized vision of rebellion doesn't land with a generation facing student debt, climate anxiety, and housing instability. Lexmoto, on the other hand, offers a different kind of freedom, one that's tangible, practical, and powered by real-world utility. It's rebellion by way of reason. Social media caught on quickly. TikTok and YouTube reviews of the 500X exploded in views. Young riders weren't just impressed, they were proud. They weren't joining someone else's legend, they were starting their own. This was rebellion without the costume, without the gatekeeping, without the price. And as Gen Z took the handlebars, the narrative around what a cool bike looks like started to shift. Because when your gear matches your needs, not your dad's dream, you don't look backward. You ride forward. As youth embraced the future on two wheels, a brutal truth began surfacing about the past Harley refused to leave behind. If you've ever questioned where your money really goes when buying a bike, hit like. Got thoughts on Harley, Lexmoto, or your own ride experience? Drop it in the comments. We're watching, and the conversation's just getting started. Built for the streets, not the museum. Harley Davidson once defined motorcycle design. Their cruisers with thick chrome and sweeping curves became synonymous with Americana. But in 2024, the streets aren't filled with rebels. They're filled with commuters, adventurers, and young professionals looking for balance, not bluster. The Lexmoto Pioneer 500X reflects that, and riders noticed. Where Harley clings to design as identity, Lexmoto builds for practicality. The 500X sports adventure styling with real-world utility. Handguards, crash bars, a tall windscreen, and spoked wheels ready for actual terrain. The frame looks purposeful. The seating is upright. The mirrors are functional. This isn't a bike built to be worshipped, it's built to be used. And it isn't trying to pretend. The Pioneer doesn't hide its plastic panels or downplay its affordability. It owns its place in the market and transforms that honesty into appeal. It says, "I'm here to ride, not to pose." That design philosophy has hit hard in an industry saturated with over-marketed machines that deliver little more than showroom presence. Harley's aging design aesthetic, once iconic, now feels ornamental. Riders don't want to pretend they're outlaws. They want USB chargers and fuel economy. They want panniers that work, displays that make sense, and parts they can replace themselves. Lexmoto gives them that. And just as Harley kept polishing chrome, the streets began filling with something leaner, smarter, and far more serious. That rejection of nostalgia wasn't just loud online, it was echoing through the parking lots where Harley once reigned. Riding smart means gearing smart. Check the description for rider-tested gloves, jackets, and gear that match this new era, affordable, functional, and built for real roads. Don't just ride, equip yourself like you mean it. The day Harley lost the parking lot. For years, Harley Davidson owners ruled the parking lot. Pull into a cafe, a petrol station, or a weekend rally, and it was the loudest bike that drew the most respect. But recently, something changed. Riders started asking about the bike that pulled up silently, cleanly, and without the premium logo. The Pioneer 500X didn't make noise. It made sense. And in rider circles across the UK and beyond, that logic became contagious. Riders spoke of value, comfort, reliability. They talked about seat height and range, not rumble or legacy. Young commuters said they couldn't justify spending $11,500 more for something that delivered less. And it wasn't just new riders. Even longtime bikers began reevaluating. Some sold their aging cruisers and picked up a 500X for daily use. Others kept their Harley, but left it in the garage. Lexmoto had done the unthinkable. It wasn't just attracting new riders, it was converting old ones. Forums lit up. Why didn't we get this 5 years ago? Feels like a proper bike, not a toy. The Harley just sits now. These weren't flukes, they were trend lines. In parking lots once dominated by thunder and chrome, now stood quiet contenders. Affordable, capable, and here to stay. And Harley Davidson? It wasn't just losing a sale, it was losing the crowd. The demographic time bomb explodes. Harley Davidson has known about its aging audience for years, but knowing is not the same as acting. The average Harley buyer today is well over 50 years old. The brand that once defined youth rebellion has become a symbol of midlife crisis and expensive nostalgia. Meanwhile, Lexmoto has stepped into the vacuum. The average Pioneer 500X rider is in their 20s, often buying their very first motorcycle, not because it's trendy, but because it's accessible. For a long time, Harley tried to ignore this shift, assuming its cultural gravity would pull in younger buyers eventually. It never happened. Youth didn't just drift away, they sprinted in the opposite direction. While Harley pushed aspirational marketing filled with desert highways and black leather, Lexmoto delivered a bike you could afford now, use every day, and repair without mortgaging your flat. The Pioneer 500X didn't try to seduce. It just worked. And now, Harley is staring down the barrel of a customer base that is not just aging, it's disappearing. The youth they failed to attract are forming new habits, brand loyalties, and communities around affordable utilitarian bikes like Lexmoto's. They're not future customers anymore. They're gone, and they've taken their entire generation with them. What makes it worse is that Harley didn't lose these riders in a fair fight. They lost them to logic. As Harley stared down the demographic cliff, a far more immediate threat came for its lifeline: profit. The death of premium. For decades, Harley Davidson's pricing strategy was bulletproof. Charge more, offer less, sell the myth. It worked because the brand carried weight, prestige, and a lifestyle fantasy baked into every sale. But the Lexmoto Pioneer 500X obliterated that illusion in one stroke. When $6,000 gets you Bosch fuel injection, switchable ABS, adventure-ready suspension, and modern rider ergonomics, the old model collapses under its own weight. Entry-level Harleys can cost over $16,000 for outdated tech, bulky frames, and poor efficiency. In an era of tight wallets, riders are calculating real value. The myth of premium is cracking, exposing a brand more exploitative than inspirational. This isn't just a pricing mismatch, it's a structural crisis. Harley depends on high margins to fund everything: factory operations, dealer incentives, executive bonuses, and international expansion. Slash the price, and the entire house of cards begins to wobble. But keep the prices high, and you keep losing customers. There is no good option left. Meanwhile, Lexmoto is playing a different game. By leveraging efficient manufacturing partnerships and building around essential features, not inflated branding, they've made the concept of premium feel outdated. Riders no longer equate price with quality. They equate it with waste. Behind showroom windows, the ripple effects weren't theoretical. They were financial and they were personal. Dealers turn on the brand. For years, Harley Davidson dealerships were more than just showrooms. They were temples of brand worship. Salespeople spoke in reverent tones about torque curves and heritage. Owners gathered for weekend rallies, chrome polishing clinics, and loyalty programs. But lately, something has changed. The foot traffic has slowed, the calls have quieted, and dealers are starting to feel the shift in their bones. Across the UK and Europe, Harley dealers are watching interest vanish. New riders aren't defecting to rivals, they're skipping Harley entirely. The Pioneer 500X offers similar appeal for a fraction of the price, making Harley feel out of reach and out of touch. Some dealers, quietly and off the record, have started diversifying their floor stock. They bring in used bikes or even carry other brands under separate corporate names. A few have started recommending Lexmoto to budget-conscious customers just to keep their goodwill alive. They don't advertise it, of course, but the cracks are visible. The loyalty is crumbling. Not because they've stopped believing in Harley, but because Harley has stopped believing in them. With fewer tools to sell, weaker promotions, and an increasingly outdated product line, these dealers are stuck defending a brand that isn't defending them back. Cornered and bleeding relevance, Harley reached for its comfort zone and made its biggest mistake yet: a panic play in chrome. Faced with declining sales and evaporating youth interest, Harley Davidson had a choice: innovate or retrench. They chose the latter. In recent months, the company has launched limited edition reissues of classic bikes, doubled down on lifestyle branding, and introduced more merchandise than meaningful upgrades. In Harley's mind, the problem wasn't the bikes, it was the storytelling. The solution? More leather, more chrome, more heritage. Harley's legacy strategy misses the mark. Gen Z isn't chasing nostalgia. They want tech, utility, and style that fits real life. With USB ports and dual sport design, Lexmoto delivers. It's not about heritage, it's about looking like you actually ride. The most telling example: Harley's latest ad campaign, a retro montage of desert rides, denim jackets, and a voiceover that sounds like a Bruce Springsteen B-side. It's nostalgia turned marketing pitch, and younger riders aren't buying it. They're mocking it. In a world where performance, utility, and affordability matter more than sentiment, Harley's throwback playbook feels like a desperate echo. While Harley's headquarters leaned into merch and memories, Lexmoto leaned into movement. And riders noticed. Because while Harley tried to repackage the past, Lexmoto was already building the future. From Birmingham to Bangkok, Lexmoto's global sprint. When the Lexmoto Pioneer 500X first rolled onto British roads, many dismissed it as just another budget bike with limited ambition. But what happened next was anything but small scale. Within months of its UK success, the Pioneer 500X began appearing in showrooms across Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, and even parts of Latin America. From Birmingham to Bangkok, riders were asking the same question: how is this bike so affordable and this good? Struggling dealerships finally had a winner. Lexmoto needed no pitch. Its specs and price spoke volumes. In towns where budgets are tight and reliability matters, it wasn't just a bike, it was proof that global relevance could start at street level. In Malaysia, young riders flocked to the Pioneer 500X for its A2-compatible design and real-world features. In Greece and Poland, local mechanics were shocked at the ease of service and parts access. In Colombia, the bike's mix of adventure-ready build and city-friendly footprint made it a favorite for delivery riders and weekend explorers alike. It wasn't viral marketing, it was visible momentum. And while global distributors scrambled to secure supply, something deeper was shifting. The motorcycle world, once shaped by legacy brands and slow innovation, was now moving to a faster beat, one set by a newcomer who refused to play by the old rules. While headlines followed the global rollout, something even bigger was unfolding in the alleyways, campuses, and city streets. The street-level uprising. Walk through any dense urban center, Manchester, Manila, Mumbai, and you'll notice the shift. Riders who once settled for used bikes, outdated tech, or nothing at all are suddenly pulling up on brand-new Lexmoto Pioneer 500Xs. Students, gig workers, recent graduates, and migrants now have access to a machine that would have been financially out of reach only a few years ago. And they're not just using it, they're rallying behind it. The Pioneer 500X didn't just make biking cheaper, it made it possible. For many, it's their first new vehicle, finally within reach. It's not about flash, it's about access. A bike that gets people where they need to go in real life. In cities where traffic is unbearable and public transport unreliable, bikes like the 500X have become a symbol of autonomy. You don't need a car loan. You don't need a luxury label. You just need a license and a plan. This is what true mobility access looks like, powered by affordability, not marketing. And with social equity comes emotional power. Riders post photos not of speed or stunts, but of everyday rides. Groceries strapped to panniers, partners riding pillion, children peeking out from behind helmets. These aren't staged lifestyle shoots, they're snapshots of mobility regained. As riders celebrated their new mobility, investors began to sense a tremor under Wall Street's feet. Wall Street watches the Tacho. For the first time in over a decade, financial analysts began raising red flags on Harley Davidson stock. The reports were not hysterical, but they were deeply concerned. Investor calls started including questions about declining youth engagement, falling dealership loyalty, and a noticeable market shift toward lower-cost competitors, especially from China. Harley's brand once felt untouchable, but investor confidence began to crack. Profits remained, yet long-term dominance looked shaky. Lexmoto's rapid rise and the threat of more Chinese challengers signaled a future where Harley's hold on key market segments could vanish entirely. Meanwhile, Chinese motorcycle stocks and manufacturing partners began to gain quiet attention. Analysts noted that these companies were not just making cheap bikes, they were leveraging advanced supply chains, global logistics, and modular platforms in ways that mirrored the auto industry's most successful disruptors. The result was a generation of motorcycles that delivered on value without compromising too much on quality. For institutional investors who had long viewed Harley Davidson as a rock-solid legacy brand, this was a sobering moment. The question was no longer, can Harley innovate? It was, can Harley survive a decade of being outpaced on both price and perception? Just as the market began adjusting to this new reality, Washington sharpened its knives. The trade war on two wheels. As Lexmoto's market share grew, Harley Davidson did what many threatened giants do. They went political. In parliamentary discussions across the UK and in early murmurs from Washington, trade policy began surfacing in the context of protecting domestic motorcycle manufacturing. Behind the scenes, Harley lobbyists and trade groups were pushing for increased tariffs on imported motorcycles from China, citing unfair pricing, worker displacement, and national brand erosion. Harley spoke of jobs and patriotism, but beneath the surface was desperation. Outpaced by competition, it turned to politics, not innovation. Some lawmakers rallied, others saw the truth. A struggling brand masking fear with flags and calling it loyalty. The irony wasn't lost on the public. After all, Harley Davidson had outsourced production for years, shifting some manufacturing to Asia to cut costs. Now, with the tables turned, they were asking for help. Riders and voters alike raised eyebrows. Was this about fairness or fear? Lexmoto, for its part, kept quiet. It didn't need a press campaign. Its defense was the bike itself, affordable, reliable, and already in the hands of tens of thousands. And if the trade war did come, it wouldn't just test governments, it would test loyalty. Because when riders already own the better bike, no tariff can make them forget it. What riders really want now. For decades, motorcycle marketing told buyers what to want: power, prestige, noise. But the rise of Lexmoto, and especially the success of the Pioneer 500X, has rewritten that script. Today's riders are not chasing status. They're chasing practicality, and for the first time in years, they are being rewarded for it. The average buyer no longer feels forced to choose between overpriced classics and underwhelming budget bikes. Now they can have advanced tech, everyday comfort, and long-haul usability, all without blowing a hole in their finances. Today's riders want practicality over posturing. Heated grips beat chrome. USB ports matter more than noise. Lexmoto offers real-world value, something Harley can't match. For modern bikers, the dream is an image. It's affordability, comfort, and a machine that fits real life. This doesn't mean the emotional connection is gone. On the contrary, it has just changed shape. Riders feel proud of making smart choices, proud of bucking brand pressure, proud of getting more for less. Lexmoto didn't just sell a bike, it validated a mindset that had been pushed to the margins. In doing so, it made a whole group of riders feel seen, heard, and most importantly, included. But behind the showroom excitement, a storm was brewing in the factories that once built America's motorcycle legacy, the union's new enemy. In union halls from Milwaukee to Manchester, the conversation has turned tense. Factory workers, many of whom spent their lives building motorcycles for brands like Harley Davidson, are watching a new generation of bikes roll in, cheaper, smarter, and not made by them. Job security, once backed by the strength of heritage brands, now feels brittle. As Lexmoto's momentum grows, the unspoken fear becomes harder to ignore. What happens when the factory lines stop moving? Harley was once a symbol of American labor pride, but its history tells a different story. With years of outsourcing and overseas assembly, its legacy now backfires, especially as job losses mount and blame circles back to who offshored first. The resentment isn't only directed outward, it's inward too. Union leaders are demanding accountability from Harley's executive teams, asking why innovation stalled, why pricing ballooned, and why younger riders were ignored. When a company builds its brand on blue-collar pride, but then fails to protect the very jobs that pride relies on, the hypocrisy becomes unbearable. Workers are angry, but they're also conflicted, because the customers buying Lexmoto aren't villains. They're not crossing picket lines, they're just doing what every working-class person tries to do: make their money go further. That internal rage didn't just stay on the shop floor, it echoed through every dealership and street corner. When prestige becomes punishment. There was a time when riding a Harley Davidson meant something powerful. It was the symbol of rebellion, independence, and nonconformity. It told the world you didn't follow rules, you made your own. But somewhere along the way, that image calcified. What was once counterculture became corporate. What was once cool became cliché. And what was once exclusive now feels exclusionary. Ask a new rider about Harley today, and the answer isn't about performance, it's about image. That logo once meant freedom. but now it signals outdated style and inflated prices. To younger riders, it feels more like a burden than a badge. Prestige, when misused, stops elevating and starts alienating. Lex Moto's rise has made this painfully clear. By offering an alternative rooted in utility, accessibility, and modern design, they've exposed the gap between Harley's branding and its reality. It's one thing to sell a dream, it's another to ignore what people are dreaming about. And here's the cruel irony. In trying to preserve its elite status, Harley pushed away the very people it needed to survive. Its exclusivity became its prison. Meanwhile, the streets filled with bikes that may not roar, but definitely resonate. Yet the biggest shift of all wasn't financial or industrial, it was cultural, and it was rewriting the motorcycle myth from the ground up. If this changed how you see the motorcycle world, or made you rethink what freedom really costs, hit subscribe. We cover the stories the industry won't. No fluff, no fanboy takes, just the truth. Straight from the street. Hit like if you're done overpaying for branding, and drop a comment if you've already made the switch or are thinking about it, because the shift isn't coming, it's already here. Don't get left behind.